The first session we have up today is the Roundtable, the Senior Education Leadership Roundtable. And I'd like to introduce Laura Walker, who is the president-elect of Bennington College. She's former CEO of New Media Public Radio. And I'll just leave it at that. And Laura, please share your insights about the Roundtable. I think you're muted, Laura. Laura, muted.
Yes, I have to unmute. Thank you so much, Andy and Charlton. That was really really interesting and deep and thoughtful presentation, and I think sets us up for some really great conversation today. So thank you. And as Andy said, I am the president-elect of Bennington. I will become the president on Monday. So until then, I get to ask the questions, not answer them. So I am delighted this morning to have three extraordinary leaders in education, from the largest urban public university in the country, CUNY, to a small independent school, the Cheshire Academy, and also liberal arts college, Wesleyan University. And despite the varying sizes of these three entities and the mix of kind of residential and commuter, today they share a lot of similar challenges, actually. And so we're going to talk today about what their plans are for reopening, and in particular how they're thinking about technology and these issues of equity that Charlton talked about. As we look at how to use, how to not just give students access, but how to promote equity in other ways and how we can use technology to do so. We are going to try to take questions at the end, so you can use the Q&A function for that. So let me just briefly say a little bit about each panelist, and then I'm going to ask you to give each panelist about 4 minutes about what your plans are and how you're thinking about these issues of equity. Julie Anderson has been the head at Cheshire Academy since 2018, and before that held teaching and administrative positions there. Cheshire is an independent school with both day students and boarders. It's actually the oldest institution on this panel. It was founded in 1794, and even though it's small, 350 students, students come from 19 states and 31 countries. On the other end of the size spectrum is Dr. Félix Matos Rodríguez, who's the Chancellor of the City University of New York, the nation's largest urban public university, and has been a real transformative engine of social mobility that in this, not just in this city, but in this world. And is a huge component of the lifeblood of New York City. Founded in 1847, CUNY has 25 colleges, serving 275,000 degree-seeking students and 225,000 adult and continuing education students. And Félix is a historian, professor, author, and noted Puerto Rican scholar. And then Michael Roth, president of Wesleyan University, which actually happens to be my alma mater, a top liberal arts college. Michael and I actually started in the same class at Wesleyan, but he completed his studies in 3 years, designed his own major, was summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, and then went on to Princeton to get his doctorate. I did none of these things. Michael is a leading thinker about the role of liberal arts colleges and has edited many volumes and of intellectual and cultural history, and has recently written a book, several books he's written, Beyond the University, Why Liberal Education Matters, and Safe Enough Spaces, A Pragmatist Approach to Inclusion, Free Speech, and Political Correctness. So Michael, I'd like to start with you. And to pick up on what Charlton was talking about, we all, as educators, need to think both about the safety of our students coming back, as well as equity issues. Can you talk a little, just give us a few minutes on what you're planning to do and how you've thought about and framed issues of equity as you've been thinking about your plans going forward?
Sure. Thank you, Laura, and thanks for having me on this distinguished panel. We are planning to have students back on campus in less than a month, and I just was on the phone with the health commissioner of the state of Connecticut and people in the governor's office, and trying to understand how we can provide a safe enough environment on campus for the students, but also a safe environment for the people in Middletown and the state of Connecticut since only 5% of our undergraduates come from Connecticut, they're coming from all over the place. And we have a testing protocol where everybody's going to be tested twice a week, and they should get their results within 48 hours, probably 24 hours. And we have invested heavily in the things you'd expect schools to invest in terms of cleanliness and hygiene. And we were able to take over a hotel in Middletown. So if we do need to isolate students, more than 96% of our students live on campus, so very different from CUNY and from Cheshire. So we have to be able to isolate people who are tested positive so as to keep them out of the chain of transmission. And then we've also offered our faculty the opportunity to teach any way they want. In other words, we didn't exert any pressure on people to teach in person. If you're, as a historian, you know how best to teach your history of early modern Japan. So whether if you think you can do that effectively in person, you can. If you want to do it remotely, you can. And we've offered lots of people workshops and guidance and technology to help them become more effective teachers. In the spring, everybody had to become an online teacher, but for some people that meant delivering a syllabus online, not teaching creatively online. So now we're doing all of those things. All of those things, however, don't get to equity exactly. It's more like, oh, we're treating everybody the same. But what's become very clear in the pandemic, and for some people was already clear, I think, is that some of our faculty, our staff, our students are disproportionately affected by this pandemic and the economic crisis that's connected to it. And so we've taken the time and tried to take the care to talk with our students from underrepresented groups, so our employees who are more vulnerable to this pandemic, to the surrounding community that is worried about the presence of another 3,000 students in Middletown, to find out ways in which we can help people, not just equally, but equitably. Because obviously, when a rich student needs our help differently than a low-income student. And although Wesleyan is a very expensive school, like other liberal arts colleges, about 20% of our students are low-income students, and almost half of our students are on significant financial aid. So we have to really be careful about not treating people equally, because that will lead to even further inequities. And sometimes when you're on campus, it's easy to forget that, because people kind of dress the same, they act the same in many ways. But in the spring, when we were zooming into the students' apartments and houses or backyards or wherever it was, suddenly you saw great disparities among the students' backgrounds and conditions. And we realized that part of our responsibility, if we claim to educate everyone, was to provide different supports for people who need different kinds of things, whether that's in the health realm, whether that's in technology, whether that's in instruction. And that's a greater challenge because the stakes are higher, because people can have, obviously they can suffer greatly because of a mistake that's made. It's not just a mistake about, you can get to play tennis or something. It's a mistake that might land you in the hospital. So we're trying to be very aware of these starting inequities so we can address them. And the only way to be really aware of that is to listen to the people who are most affected by this, our students, our employees, and to hear what they think they need, and then for us to try to find ways to address those needs.
Thank you, Michael, that's great. Felix, in March, you oversaw within a week the transition of nearly all of CUNY's 50,000 course sections to distance education. That is an amazing task. And you've also, I think, really grappled with access questions of Wi-Fi and computers. And right now you're opening all 25 colleges, and after already 40 CUNY, I think it is 40 CUNY staff, students, and faculty have died from the pandemic. So you are facing, you've done an amazing job getting all this technology together, but can you talk a little bit about what you're doing for the fall and also dealing with these questions of equity?
Yeah, thank you, Laura, and thank you for the invite. And like Michael said, we begin classes on August 20. I mean, we have a summer session, right? So I mean, when people talk about reopening, I always say it's a funny term for us. We've been open and we've been operating, and in a very different way. First we try to learn from the experience in the spring. Like you said, it was not the semester that anybody had signed up for, and kudos to I guess we can brag. We're in New York City. Kudos to New Yorkers. I mean, we were in the thick. We were the epicenter of the pandemic back in March and April, with all the emotional, health, social, and economic implications that Laura mentioned, facing us in all directions, our students, our faculty, our staff, everybody. And kudos to the faculty and the students for that great adaptability. I mean, if one of the things that we're supposed to be doing in higher ed is to prepare you for a world in which there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and change, yes. Last semester was a great exercise in that, because faculty that had not taught online, and faculty that actually might now have liked the idea of, when incredible solidarity, incredible humanity to what their students were going through. I mean, I have faculty asking students to send pictures of written papers for students who didn't have the computer to send something nicely printed, and they were getting that and reading that and giving feedback. As they were dealing with their own set of issues, right? The faculty, they could be having their kids at home. They might be dealing with family members. So a great story on adaptability, on resilience, on learning. And what we try to do, similar to what Michael and others have said, we've invested heavily in the professional development of our faculty to be ready for a semester in which we're going to be offering, we haven't sort of made a final determination that's done, consistent with our other stakeholders in the state and the city. But right now, in terms of the way the faculty have structured the courses, we have about 95% of our classes online or hybrid, and really just the courses that are labs and studio courses face-to-face, with all the social distancing and all the rules to make those environments small, safe, and protected, but also inviting folks who teach those courses to try to push the envelope and say, the lab course, the first hour and a half is a lecture. Can we do that online and just really have that face-to-face time minimized to protect everybody involved? I mean, one of the things that's been interesting in this role, Laura, has been that the conversation in higher ed, when they talk about opening in the fall, it is so amazing how the sector forgets the majority of the students in the country who are commuter students, right? It was all about the dorms and what are we going to do? I mean, and not that that's unimportant, and we have 1% of our students are in dorms, which is small, but we're so large, right? that is the size of a liberal arts college, right? The 4,000 or 5,000 students that we have in dorms could be a separate campus. So, even though they were not our large universe, we needed to be able to think about that. But it's been interesting to me how, we have to think about, and this is why we want to minimize the density on the campuses for our faculty, staff, and students. They depend on public transportation. I mean, that's New York City, right? So we need to think about that component, about the movement of them coming in and out of their different communities. So we want to be in a position where that is really minimized, and then being ready with the local health authorities to be supportive should an incident occur, to work with the contact tracing, to work with testing and similar protocols that we all abiding to in higher ed. On the issue of access, we had to purchase 33,000 computers to distribute to the students. And it was a logistical nightmare because you wanted to do it with social distancing and, all the things that kept people safe. We actually had to take an additional week, and that was because of a technical thing. I mean, we ordered the computers when all the world was asking for more computers to do the same thing with their students, right? So we had a delayed shipment, and we made a very conscious decision. And I took a lot of flack from people that already had the momentum of getting the class going to say, we need to stop. Because if a week that some of the students might not have the technology they need, they might drop out. I might lose them, right? I mean, those are the students we serve. So to leave no one behind, we had to take an additional week of break, which was just moving a spring break that nobody was going to take forward. But that was not a very simpatico decision, but we really had to do it to serve the students that we want. We did a survey going to Michael's point about listening, and about 1% of our students mentioned that they really have no Wi-Fi access at home. So one of the things that we're doing for this semester is trying to get a number of hotspots so we can provide it for those students to really facilitate. We're going to have minimum traffic on the campus, but that traffic is going to be maximized thinking about the students we serve, the food pantries, some of the computer labs to address this issue. Also, if the campus is safe for you to go for a little bit and be there, better than depend on Wi-Fi. So it's been an interesting, and by the end of the summer we would have online professional development for about 2,000 faculty members. I mean, and by the end of the year probably another 1,500. And we are also trying to pay special attention in those trainings and sessions about the students who are more vulnerable and the students for whom the data shows that the online experience doesn't work as well. Many of those students are in our community colleges, so we need to think about that population. So we're trying to be very intentional, dealing with a situation which is not perfect, and it's temporary in getting ready. So I'll end there, and happy to take any additional questions or comments or discussion as we go along. But thank you.
Thank you. That's what an amazing number of students and in such an uncertain time, and kudos to the faculty, the staff, and the community. So going from the largest to the smallest, Julie, you have many of the same challenges, right? And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your opening, but also about, in particular, you have many, many international students. And
yes.
How are you dealing with issues particularly of equity with the international students?
Great. So thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And Michael, I am a proud Cardinal, so go Wesleyan. For us, our challenges are a little bit different because we're dealing with younger students. So on our campus, we have 340 students, and we are about 60% of those are boarding. As Laura mentioned, we have about 30% of our student population is international. So we're dealing with students from maybe 14, some maybe as old as 19, who are in our care. And for us, equity, when we think about equity and engagement for our students, it's both with our international and our domestic students, but also, as was mentioned, with the boarding students versus our day students. So when we had to pivot very quickly last March, we have an amazing faculty and staff, and our academic office leaders really led the charge in preparing our faculty with professional development. And that's continuing certainly all summer as we are preparing the technology piece to really enhance what we've done. But we had to think about how were our international students, a large number of whom were 12 hours away, how would they access the classroom? And we know many schools are recording lessons and students are checking in later, but we wanted our kids to really have a live experience, to be with their teacher and to be with their classmates who were here in the US. So we devised a schedule that would work for most of our students, with the exception of a couple who had to get up a little bit early, but really so that we could keep everyone engaged. And that model we are continuing to use for the fall. So our students who are remote, which is now going to be a significant number due to visa challenges getting their F1 visa or travel restrictions, we do have a number of students who will be joining us remotely. As well as a few students who, for different health reasons, have decided to take either a semester or the year remote. We want to make sure we can keep everyone engaged. So our faculty will be starting in the morning strictly with our remote students. And then mid-morning, our remote students and our on-campus students will have a concurrent period of learning once a week. We've made investments in our technology so that those remote students not only have their own one-on-one time with their teacher, but they're also joined in for a period of the day so that they are working with, they are interacting with their classmates. They're in the classroom that we hope we will see them in by the end of the year. And there really already becomes a sense of community. That's one of the most important parts of our school, this supportive nature, this sense of community. And then after that concurrent session, our teachers will be working with our face-to-face students. So it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of flexibility, and I think that's what's really important. We've seen, again, as was mentioned, surveys of our students, of our parents throughout the spring really helped us to set up what we think will work best for our community. We've done just like everyone else. We have our plan set for our testing, both the PCR testing and antigen testing for our students once they're on campus. Again, because we have younger students, we are requiring all of our international students and those who live further than a couple-hour drive to have guardians, so that if a student is to test positive, that they can be isolated in a separate dorm that will be our COVID care center on campus, and then that they will be taken home with a parent or guardian for the 14 days to make sure that they can come back to campus healthy. But it's a lot of work, but it's exciting work. And I think the best part that we've talked about as faculty and staff is the fact that we can engage students who may not physically be able to be here. We can provide technology for students who need it. We had to be careful for our students, for example, in mainland China. We had to avoid using certain platforms that we took for granted that we could use here in the US, that they wouldn't be able to access. And a lot of just really exciting work that teachers collaborating with colleagues at other schools, universities, finding out how you can do music, how you can do theater, using a lot of new programs. So as much as it's been a challenge, it's been exciting, and we're really looking forward to welcoming our kids back to campus.
Thank you, Julie. Felix, I just wanted to pick up on something you said in your comments, that the online experience doesn't work for all, or it works differently for different people. And because, you know, I know a lot of students are feeling, some of them like it, but most of them feel very challenged by it. And there are issues of equity in terms of how people learn, how people, it goes beyond just the access to the technology. Are there, so can you talk a little bit more about how your faculty are thinking about that? And are there opportunities in this? For example, my son said to me, he thought in one of the classes he was taking in law school that it actually kind of leveled the playing field to some extent, because there weren't the same people just raising their hands, and the Socratic method, all of that was more equalized. But I'd be curious. Your thoughts on that.
I mean, yes, thank you for the question. I mean, the first thing is that yeah, I feel very fortunate, and I came to CUNY as a faculty member several moons ago. But our faculty care about equity issues since the beginning, right? So this is built in the DNA of the things that we think about. Not that we're perfect, not that there's not work to be done, but most of the faculty and most of the staff that are in our campuses, this is one of the reasons why they want to be part of the CUNY family, because they know that story of social mobility and access is really part of the DNA. So locally we have that in the gene pool going in, and I think that then now the question is, so how does that play out in this temporary universe in which we are mostly online? And then how would it play out hopefully in the future, where this experience would allow us to have maybe a more robust menu of options? And what I think has been really good, and I'm particularly happy because it was one of my priorities coming in. This is my first year as chancellor, right? I went through the biggest baptism through fire that anybody could have. Maybe Laura, you going in, right? It'd be the equivalent when you begin. But it's thinking more thoroughly about pedagogy and how that is tied up to student success. And I think a big, hopefully winner of this whole experience would be that these issues of equity and these issues of pedagogy would be much more centered into whatever menu of options we decide to have moving forward. So that's been, it's been in the conversations that our faculty groups have had. We have them convene about what are the best, now that we're doing this, what are the best modalities for the kinds of programs and platforms that we should be having? How do you factor that? How do you factor that in the conversation? So I think that I have seen that as something front and center. We're also doing it with the student support services, right? And there's also a learning curve as you're working with those a lot more virtually. And we've done some professional development to the staff who's been doing the advising, the mental health work, which is obviously, it was an important thing that we needed to do when things were normal now for all of us in dealing with this thing. So, I mean, I think that the inequities that the whole conversion showed have given us a roadmap for things to continue to do, that the faculty have been and the administration have been engaged in saying, as we do this thing online, what are the things that we need to think about? We've also been thinking about it with the summer melt, right? In partnering with the DOE in getting, the summer melt is an issue for all of us. Again,
so
even
just
in
to
normal.
define that for a second.
No, it's just the fact that during the summer in which the students, I mean, there's several versions of it, right? The students who, because they're not doing anything academic, right? Sort of their academic muscles are not in the best shape to come back to classes when we begin in August or September, right? Because they've been really not being engaged in anything academic over the summer. So you need to re-engage them. But then also we lose a lot of students, either students who finish in the DOE and are supposed to start and they don't show up, and for a whole variety of reasons. So we've been doubling down on the efforts that we've been having to get ready for the summer melt. Some of the programs that we've designed are using student mentors. So we're giving summer employment to our students, which is a way to deal with some of the equity issues and some of the lost opportunities that we've had in the city, because the other big thing we're not talking about is the fiscal crisis, right? That also doubles down on those who are the poorest. But so we've been working on the summer melt and things like that to try to, we looked at the students that dropped out, assuming that maybe the online didn't work, and are trying to bring them back. So again, there's a lot of, because of our size, large level work, but a lot of individual one-on-one TLC to try to recapture those and hope that whenever we go back to a, let's say, post-vaccine world in which we have a much more balanced menu, that we have not lost them.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And Michael, I know you think a lot about the pedagogy and the, and in general and specifically right now. Can you give us some examples of what is going on at Wesleyan in terms of both the kind of pedagogy on the online space and also issues of equity? And then if you also could address mental health issues. And this is obviously a huge issue on many, many college campuses. And with the economic distress that's going on, I think this morning's numbers are 32% annual economic decline during this past quarter. If it were annualized, that's a really hard thing for a lot of people. Anyway, first the pedagogy and mental health.
So pedagogy and mental health, they go together, I guess. We started a kind of online experiments several years ago with Coursera, like in the early MOOC days. We were one of the only liberal arts colleges that became a partner institution, but it wasn't very popular among my faculty colleagues. I just found a group of people who wanted to experiment, and
you do it too, right? You've taught a class.
I do it too, yeah. So I teach a kind of traditional humanities course called the Modern and the Postmodern, and then I did a course where I interviewed lots of experts around global issues called How to Change the World. And I thought this was extremely interesting, and I learned a lot from, I have students from 100 different countries, different ages. I mean, I've been teaching at a small liberal arts college or went to school there my whole life. So it was very interesting and exciting. I don't know that I learned that much about the range of tools that one can use online, but others of my colleagues have. And they've been extremely generous in sharing their experiments with others on the faculty and beyond. And we've had lots of workshops in this regard. And I think we surveyed our students about their online experience and our faculty. And the faculty said, hey, it's a lot better than I expected it would have been. And the students said it wasn't so great. But they actually also, in their course evaluations for the spring of 2020, their average grade for the courses was higher, and for the teaching, than it was for 2019. So I think it's so much depends on the ability of the instructor to connect to the students. Yeah. That's true in the room. It's true in a computer, and every good teacher knows that not everybody is connected with in the same way. If you treat everybody the same, you're failing, actually, because not everybody learns in the same ways. And so as a teacher, one always tries to figure out, how do I get in the head of the student? How do I begin to get to reach them? And how do I give them the ability to reach me? And I found that challenging in this format in Zoom, but I also found it exciting in ways. And I found myself reaching out to students more informally when they were away from campus than I would have had they been on campus, where I would have kind of bumped into them. And I think that for all our students, that forging connections is the key. And maybe that's a segue, and that works from pedagogy. And whether you're doing theater, we had an incredible experiment in theater. Katie Pearl was doing the method gun, which is a kind of improvisational play around the method. And so that in the play, the framework of the play, the actors go off to be isolated, to dig deep and find out what's going on inside them to get it out. So of course, they get isolated. They're scattered all over the world. And the teacher had them mount the play live on YouTube. And then it was all recorded there. And 2 or 3 performances, which were spectacular. I mean, I went because I'm a cardinal. I had to go to these things. And I sat through it with awe, and it was, I think it was probably a better experience for the students than if they'd been in the theater, and that's because the teacher was a genius and the students worked and all that stuff. Mental health is that same issue of connection, for many of our students, and we, I think a lot of people have discovered, and a lot of psychiatrists have discovered, that telemedicine and teletherapy, it can be extremely effective for some people. And there are other people who really, it doesn't work as well. And then in complex cases where it's really important to get a nuanced sense of a person and their medication and their other, that telemedicine may be less effective. But I think it's really hard to generalize. And I've had to struggle with my own staff in psychological services to say, you can reach people in California or in Arizona or in Shanghai. They don't have to be here on campus. And we've had, tensions around that. But I do think that it's indicative of our situation A petition I received yesterday, and I get petitions more than Tevye sings about tradition, I sing about petitions. I got a petition yesterday from hundreds of students. They had a few, just 5 or 6 demands. One of them was no hiring freeze in psychological services. Yeah. So for the students, it's so important to know they have a resource of psychotherapy and psychopharmacology. And I think that's something we have to respond positively to.
Is there opportunity? I know this is one of the things we're thinking about at Bennington for students who don't see and don't have the opportunity to see therapists of color or people who have had experience that they've had internationally or whatever, to bring some new therapists into the loop?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's still those therapists are still in high demand. Even
Right.
They only have so many hours, even if they're remote. But yes, I do think it expands your opportunity to recruit someone to Bennington or to Middletown, Connecticut. It is not always so easy to recruit someone to work with your students, even if they don't have to move from New York or wherever. That may be actually easier.
Yeah, thank you. Let's just turn to tech, and then we'll have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions. Again, put the questions in Q&A. Julie, you are thinking hard about testing, and because you're both boarding and you're day students, and people are coming in and out of the community a lot, and all of you have staff and workers who are living in communities that may be infected. So can you just talk a little bit about what you're doing? And in particular, I was really interested in your antigen testing protocol and how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, so I've learned more than I ever thought I would know about the virus and testing and the difference between the PCR and the antigen. So we're really fortunate in Connecticut with our Association of Independent Schools to have a group of medical directors from each school that collaborate and work together. We looked at many different options for testing with labs and found one that we felt would work, best for us with our needs to get a quick turnaround time, and that was within a reasonable price for this school, because certainly all COVID-related expenses are, it's something that was unplanned for when doing budgeting work in the years earlier in the year and the year before. So we're starting with partnering with a lab that's out of Cambridge, and we will administer the test here on campus for our faculty and staff, send it out, and we should receive results within 24 to 48 hours. Our students are going to come to campus with a negative PCR test. That's a molecular test, which is the most accurate, and that's anytime they return after a holiday break or for the start of the year, they're going to come with that. And we provide a prescription for them. So hopefully they'll, wherever they're coming from, they'll come with that. And then as required by the state, we're following the college reopening plan. We'll have weekly testing in our boarding population, including our faculty. And we can do that on campus. So there's the antigen test. There's several different options out there. There's something called a Sophia 2. There's a BD Vector machine. We'll be working with the BD Vector on campus where we can administer and we can get the results on campus. It's a rapid antigen. Of course, the challenge with the PCR versus the antigen is not as, it is not always as accurate because it's not as sensitive. It does detect certain parts of the virus, but it doesn't detect the genetic material. So with that, the positives we will know, we'll be able to isolate students, but with the negatives, we'll then send them out for a PCR test as well. And there's hope that by October, there's another machine that's coming out that we are on the list that we've signed a contract for, where we can do the PCR testing right on campus, that molecular test that has that high level of accuracy. And our parents are all on board. They understand that the testing protocol is going to be part of what we need. And as we have minors, we will get those test results so that we can mitigate how the information is delivered. We certainly don't want a young student to get notice that they are that they've tested positive and be concerned about that. So it's going to be busy, but we're ready.
That's great. There's one question here about to what degree, it says, do limitations in testing availability drive you to think about technology solutions merely as a supplemental secondary solution? So what are the use cases where tech is truly a primary solution that you look at regardless of the situation with testing resource availability? So I think the question really is, are there other technology or something where technology can help with the lack of testing, or I think the challenge that everyone's going to have, which is what's the turnaround time on the testing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of the use of technology, certainly, and I think everyone is looking at using this, doing daily, there's so many apps that are coming out to do daily symptom checks. We can use technology for contact tracing. So if you're not available or don't have access to a test, you can certainly at least start looking at some contact tracing if someone in your community does let you know that they've been in contact with someone on the outside. The testing changes daily. I know there's a lot of concern, especially in August, as colleges and universities and boarding schools and everybody's going back to school. And companies, I think, are sort of fighting to say, we have it, we can guarantee, and we've signed on the dotted line, and then they've come back and said, no, we can't guarantee. So it's constantly changing. And I think this is one of the real challenges for school leaders, whether it's, at the level that I'm at, secondary or college level, that as things are changing, we're having to pivot, and having that testing is so important. So we're feeling good about it, though, right now.
Schools who have changed their plans. Felix, you were nodding. If you could maybe address that, and also as we close, maybe I'll go around and ask you to think about one of the things that Charlton was framed, which was the use of technology, whether it's contact tracing or testing or whatever it is, as his challenge, I think, to us is to say, can we think about the ownership or the kind of way that we're implementing and using technology in a community as a way, as thinking that the community and the various different stakeholders have ownership and are going to think about the equity issues in how you use that technology. So Felix, anything on the testing, and then if you could address that quickly, and then we'll go around the room.
Yeah, so I mean, on the testing, all I was going to say is that, one of the things, and it's difficult to communicate, is that, and I've told my team, I said, in 2 months, we could be thinking about something different based on new information, new protocols. That's very humbling. And also sometimes to the outside world, it looks like you don't have your house in order because you are shifting signals. And I think people need to understand that the terrain is very, uneven, right? And that we're dealing with the best information that we have at times. There are real supply issues. I mean, Julie mentioned that, and people forget that is also real, right? In terms of, so I think it's a time where the communication to build trust, right? That everybody is working to the best solution, that you're incorporating all the opinions, that we're not all going to agree, because this talks about human differences on assessing risk. And you and I and the 4 of us can look at the same data and come up with different takes on our ability to adjust to risk, and we need to account for that at a time where there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of sense of powerlessness, a lot of hurt economically. We have the Black Lives. I mean, so all these things are part of the mix, and we need to keep at building trust and going at it and at it and at it until we get out. Yeah. I think that the challenge on the larger equity, I think that it's on the table. It's on the table, and we need to keep pushing it. Is going to lead to uncertain territory, as many also things that have to do with tech do, right? That's the other part of pushing some boundaries of comfort and privacy and all these things that are key. But I mean, I'm in this line of work because I'm an optimist, and I do hope that once we venture sort of the worst of this thing, that those will be value addeds that we'll have as we then conduct our business in whatever becomes the new normal, and that those values will be a lot more front and center. That those questions will not be they'll be front and center again, and so I'm hopeful about what that can do for higher ed moving forward.
Great, thank you so much. So very quickly, because Andy has appeared back on the screen, Julie and then Michael, I gave you the first word, I'll give you the last word on kind of these issues of equity and technology.
I think what I've seen, what we've been really pleased with as far as equity in some ways, we're, again, really small. We're able to one-on-one talk with our students, talk with our families, make adjustments, give them extra support. We've also been able to find, as far as a school, for our technology investment, a lot of really great free resources out there. So working on that and making sure that we're making sure all of our students, whether they're here with us or remote, have the same access to the education that we promise, so that we're giving them, whether they're in front of us or whether they're, on Zoom, that they're getting the same experience that they've been promised.
Great. And Michael, with just your thoughts and how you get a community to buy in and make something better and more equitable in terms of tech.
So just very quickly, this is a massive failure of the idea of decentralization and fighting a major crisis.
Yeah.
This is a massive failure of democratic government or of federal government. It is a disgrace that we have to all make these things up as we go along. And it shows that a certain approach to problem solving is totally inadequate when facing a massive crisis. And what we have to do in each of our cases is to build trust in an environment where trust is in short supply, because only if people trust each other will they cooperate enough to make our local solutions work as well as possible, absent a coordinated response to a global catastrophe. And this idea that you can set all these different companies off to do their own thing, and then that somehow the marketplace will come up with the best solution. 150,000 people have died because of that stupid ideology. And it's an ideology that's deep in technology and the technology companies. And it doesn't work when confronted with either a war, a massive weather events, or climate change, and it doesn't work with a pandemic. So we have to build weak tools of trust locally in order to save as many lives as possible and continue to educate students.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, all three of you. Your institutions and students and faculty and staff are so lucky to have you at the helm. And I think it would be interesting to check in a few months and see how it all went. But good luck with it all. And then thank you again. And back to you, Andy.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, Laura, in your new journey.
Thank you so much.
Yes, good luck.
Bye-bye.